The untouchable True School Sports Empire proudly presents something the boxing games are missing. Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, this is the post-fight review for Terence Crawford versus Kell Brook. Terence Crawford is different. He put the fear of God in Kell Brook. Fourth round stoppage. Oh my God. I cannot listen. I'm not surprised that Terence Crawford won. That's not surprising me because Terence Crawford's obviously a great fighter. You know, earlier in the week, I actually initially thought Crawford was going to win, but then I started getting gassed on Kell Brook. I thought he was going to win, man. I thought with a no rehydration clause, with this combination of skills, patience, size, versatility, championship experience, it was gonna be a much more competitive fight, and I picked him to win. So you win some, you lose some. But I did not, in my wildest dreams, see Terence Crawford stopping Kell Brook before the fifth round. If you would have told me that shit before the fight, I would have said you're on drugs. No way. But it was a really interesting fight. First two rounds I gave to Kell Brook. You know, I thought Kell Brook did a good job of picking off Crawford with his jab, mixed in the right hand. And just overall did a good job of making Terence fall short and miss punches by inches the first couple of rounds. Round three, Terence switches to southpaw, right? So he switches to southpaw, which if you're Kell Brook, your eyes must have been lighting up because you want to throw the straight right hand, you know? So he switches to southpaw, and he immediately takes control of the fight. He starts throwing jabs with more speed. He starts sharp shooting with the left hand, and as that round went on, Crawford got better. And then the fourth round, he just ends the fight. Brook runs into a real stiff, hard jab and damn near gets knocked out the ring like Joe Smith Jr. and Terence Crawford did what Gennady Golovkin and he beat Kell Brook in a fashion that Gennady Golovkin and Errol Spence did not do. And when we talk about comparing his performance to Errol Spence, because that's what people are going to do. You know, a lot of people, I've seen it on social media and I had it on my live, you know, shout out to the 30,000 of you that are on the live, you know. We really appreciate you guys. It was a hell of a fight. But what I wanted to say was, what I wanted to say about Kell Brook and Crawford was the fact that the people are shitting on Crawford's win because they're saying he's fighting Spence's leftovers, right? But when Spence won the title against Kell Brook, I saw almost nobody say that he's fighting a Gennady Golovkin leftover because it was convenient for them. So keep that same energy. If you're saying that he's fighting Spence leftovers, then Spence fought Gennady Golovkin's leftovers, and Golovkin fought the real Kell Brook. I don't want to hear none of this bullshit. What I will say is this: Terence Crawford fought a better version of Kell Brook than Errol Spence did. People are going to say that he didn't because they're going to say the eye injury and all this stuff. But no, he did. Kell Brook didn't lose his fight because of an eye injury. He lost his fight because he got hit with some shit he's never been touched with in his life. That's why he lost his fight. Errol Spence had the greatest advantage any fighter's ever had against Kell Brook. He fought him right after the Golovkin fight. He fought him on a quick turnaround, having to scale down 2 weight classes, and it took him 11 rounds and for him to break an eye socket to get him out of there, you know? I really believe in my heart of hearts, if Kell Brook never fought Golovkin before he fought Spence, he would have outclassed Errol Spence because he was in the first half of the fight. He just didn't have that extra bit of energy towards the end to really get through the second half of the fight. And Terence Crawford's performance was much better than Errol Spence. Much better. And I don't give a damn what none of these Errol Spence fans say. It was much better than Errol Spence. And it goes back to what I'm saying, you know. Terence Crawford is better than Errol Spence all the way around the board. All the way around the board, he's better than Errol Spence. You know, he's a better technical boxer than Errol Spence. He'll outfight Errol Spence on the inside if he feels like it. He'll outfight Errol Spence mid-range if he feels like it. You know, he's that guy. And if anything, man, like I picked against him for the first time in Terence Crawford's entire boxing career. I actually did the stupidest shit I ever did in my life. I picked against him, which I shouldn't have did. But I really believed in Kell Brook. And for the first 2 rounds, you know, I thought my pick looked pretty damn good. Kell Brook was looking pretty good with poise with the jab. But you can't. The thing is, like they were telling me this on the live. And I know this already because I'm a Crawford fan and I watch all of his fights. You can't get gas if you win the first 2 rounds against Crawford. You really can't, because Hank Lundy, you could make the case that Hank Lundy won the first 2 rounds against Crawford. It's those third, those fourth, those fifth, those sixth rounds that matter. That's when Crawford, he downloads the information. What they say Lomachenko does is what Crawford really does. He downloads the information, and once that shit's downloaded, the processor and all that stuff in the computer starts working, and you get results fairly quickly. And in this fight, I can't think of a Terence Crawford fight. I really can't. Not even his mandatory defenses. Like, you think about like his fights against like Thierry Jean and Hank Lundy and who else? Who else am I thinking about? Thierry Jean, Hank Lundy. These guys that were like looked at to be worse than Kell Brook. These guys did better. they lasted more rounds. I don't know if they did better. Well, I don't know if Thierry Jean won. Thierry Jean didn't win as many rounds as Kell, but pretty sure he lasted longer. But I could be wrong. So if I'm wrong, correct me on that in the comments. And honestly, the more Terence Crawford wins, and the more he blows to people like Kell Brook and guys like that, like it's nothing, the better Victor Postal looks. How good does Victor Postal look right now? Victor Postal was the guy that was champion. He was the other best guy in the weight class. Fought Terence Crawford. He was the last guy to go 12 rounds with Crawford. Crawford has stopped every opponent he's fought since Victor Postal. This is the same Victor Postal that fought Jose Ramirez, and I thought he beat Jose Ramirez. But either way you slice it, he gave a great account of himself in that fight. It's the same Victor Postal that ruined Lucas Batiste's life. Forget his career, he ruined his life, man. He's never been the same since. So he looks really good the more Terence Crawford wins and stops these guys like Kell Brook, because, man, just Terence Crawford, he's 33 years old, but I don't really consider him an old fighter. I feel like he's truly in his prime. He's maturing. He's getting better at breaking down fighters, which is a scary thing to do, which is a scary thing to think about. He's maturing in an amazing way, man. Terence Crawford with his ability to switch hit, all that stuff, man. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for him, and I'm giving him the full credit in the world, because I'm not one of these people that was out here saying Kell Brook was washed up before the fight, and I'm damn sure not saying it after the fight. He beat a very good Kell Brook tonight, and we saw in those first 2 rounds a Kell Brook that was picking Terence Crawford off with a jab. He was landing the straight right hands for the first 2 rounds. I mean, it wasn't like Terence was pot shotting and moving and was on his back foot. Terence was boxing with Kell Brook the first 2 rounds. And the first 2 rounds Terence was boxing with Kell Brook, technically Kell Brook was better than him the first 2 rounds. So Kell Brook, even in the fight where people are going to shit on him and say he was trash, even in a fight people are going to shit on him and say he was trash, he still showed that technically speaking, he's as good as anybody in boxing. And what I said holds to be true. It's just Terence Crawford is on a whole other tier right now, a whole other planet right now from Kell Brook, from every welterweight in the world except maybe Manny Pacquiao and Errol Spence. So, actually, no, fuck that. He's better than Errol Spence. He's way better than Errol Spence, and I've always thought he's better than Errol Spence. And if Errol Spence ever gets out of witness protection and wants to put his jeans on, his big boy jeans on, and fight the man Terence Crawford, I'll be more than willing to see that fight. Terence Crawford will outclass Errol Spence Jr. easily. But I'm going to end the video by saying a couple of things. First of all, congratulations to Terence Crawford. I think this is the best performance of his career, because he didn't just beat anybody. He beat the former IBF world champion. He beat a guy that's never been dominated like that. Like, even when Golovkin fought Kell Brook, even when Errol Spence fought Kell Brook, these guys had to press him so hard to get him out of there. And, Crawford didn't have to press that hard at all to get him out of there. And that's not because of the eye. It's because Kell Brook got hit with some shit he never saw before. And when he was hurt, Crawford does what he does best. He finishes you. And that's what it is. But I want to close the video out by paying respects to one of my favorite fighters over the last 10 to 15 years, Kell Brook, and as well as Crawford. Crawford's one of my favorite fighters as well. But I feel like this has to be the end of the road for Kell Brook. Like, to me, in his career, there's nothing you can do now. You've boxed at every level. You've been British champion. You've beaten British champions. You've been world champion. You took the title from Sean Porter in America. You did what nobody in their right mind thought about doing, and fighting Gennady Golovkin in his prime. I mean, Kell Brook fought Gennady Golovkin in his prime before Canelo got the balls to do it. If anything, Kell Brook gave Canelo the blueprint on how to beat Golovkin. Freaking Canelo didn't even feel comfortable fighting Gennady Golovkin until Kell Brook fought him, and he saw what the speed and the accuracy and the movement of Kell Brook and how it gave Golovkin fits. He didn't feel comfortable fighting him until he saw that fight. So Kell Brook, he fought the most dangerous fighter, one of the most dangerous fighters boxing's produced in the last 10 to 15 years as a smaller man, and was backing him up. I mean, I know he lost, he got stopped, but he was backing him up, and he delivered some great moments in that fight. You know, that fight ruined him. You know, in retrospect, you know, long term, that fight ruined him. He's never been the same since. You know, he even said it in the post-fight interview. You know, he said, I for some reason, I couldn't throw that right hand tonight. And the reason he couldn't throw the right hand is because subconsciously, he is not the same fighter that he was pre-Golovkin. And it's unfortunate. You know, maybe there was a part of me that always knew this, but didn't want to admit it to myself because I love Kell Brook so much, and I was pulling for him to win. But you got to face the facts. He's telling you himself, so you can't argue with that. But he fought Golovkin when nobody wanted to fight him. You know, Canelo didn't want to no smoke with him. He fought him then. You know, and then he probably should have listened to Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn didn't want him to fight Errol Spence, but Kell Brook had so much pride as the warrior that he is, and when the IBF called mandatory and said you gotta fight Errol Spence or you're gonna be stripped of your belt, he said, I'm gonna fight him. Fuck it, I'm gonna fight him. You know, who's this kid Spence? I'm not gonna let this prospect take my title that I worked so hard for. You know, if I'm gonna lose this fight, if I'm gonna lose this title, someone's gonna have to beat me for it. And you know, a lot of fighters, and I always say this about Kell Brook, a lot of fighters, if you take 100 fighters and put them in that position, 98 of them are going to not do what Kell Brook did. And you could say it was a stupid move on his part, and maybe it was, but for me, he gets so much more of my respect for that because, you know, the hardest thing to do in life is the thing that's not convenient for you. And he fought Errol Spence, and in that fight, you know, I rewatched it recently, and he was outboxing Errol Spence. He was taking him to school the first 6 rounds. First 6 rounds, he was taking him to school. And then the back half of that fight, the Golovkin side effects kicked in, and he wasn't able to press through in the second half of that fight. And Errol Spence broke his other eye socket. And I really think in my heart of hearts, I truly believe to this day, if the Golovkin fight never happened and he would have just been Kell's mandatory and they would have fought, Kell would have beat him rather easily because he was in the first half of that fight. Then, you know, he rebuilds himself. He gets some decent wins against guys like Rabchenka and Zarafa and whatnot. Didn't look good in the Zarafa. It looked like trash in the Zarafa fight. Beats DeLuca as well. And then, you know, even though it was against Eddie Hearn's best wishes again, when Eddie Hearn was sitting on his ass not doing nothing, he goes and he challenges the best fighter in the world in Terence Crawford. How can you not respect Kell Brook? You can say he's washed up. You can say, but how can you not respect him? How can you say he's a bitch? How can you say these things about him when all he's ever done was fight the best? When all he's ever done is try to go out there and see how and see where he's at in this sport. You know, we criticize a lot of fighters for not fighting the best. Like Joe Calzaghe went 46-0, and great fighter, great champion, but like people always say he didn't fight this guy, he didn't fight that guy, he ducked this guy, he ducked that guy, he was protected in England. But then when we get a fighter from the same country, a British fighter, this guy goes out there and he seeks all the best competition, even when it's not the most convenient for him, because he really wanted to know how good he was in the sport. For that reason and that reason alone, Kell Brook will always be a personal favorite of mine. It's unfortunate that he lost 3 of his 4 big fights because Kell Brook had all the talent in the world to be the best welterweight in the world at one point in time. He really did. And, you know, a couple of times tonight when he was boxing Terence Crawford those first 2 rounds, you saw flashes of what people thought he was going to be, which was the best welterweight in the world. But there comes a time where age and punishment catches up with you, and unfortunately for Kell, it has, and it did against Terence Crawford. And you know, he's going to go down. He's going to go down when the history books are written. Kell Brook will go down as a fighter who had unfulfilled potential. You know, he should have went down as one of the all-time great, not just British fighters of all time, but he really, when you look at his talent and everything he brought to the table, he should have went down as one of the greatest welterweights of all time. He really should have, because he had it all, and he had it to do it. It's just, that's boxing, man. One bad fight, one wrong fight at the wrong time can ruin a fighter's legacy and career, and that's what in Kell Brook's career is a great cautionary tale, that because that's the Golovkin fight did for him. If he would have fought Jesse Vargas unification, I believe he would have beat Jesse Vargas, and I believe he would have been unified champion, and that would have changed the whole trajectory of his career in the welterweight division forever. But Respect to Kell Brook. I hope I can meet Kell Brook one day and interview him because I have the utmost respect for him. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. And so is Terence Crawford. You know, Terence Crawford is the best fighter in America. He's flying the flag high for American boxing right now. He's the best we got to offer. He beat a damn good fighter in Kell Brook in a fashion nobody's beat him in. And I hope Errol Spence, PBC, and all the clowns over there stop ducking him and make the fight that the fans want to see, which is Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford. Shout out to my man Rodney, my lord. I was talking hella shit to my boy Rodney, who's a big Terence Crawford fan. I'm a big Kell Brook fan. I'm a big Crawford fan too, but I was really going with Kell Brook because I really thought this fight was going to go a lot differently than it did. And Terence Crawford showed me again. He showed me again, even when I'm rooting against him, why he is that guy, why he is one of the best fighters in the world, and why he's making a case for himself as one of the greatest fighters of all time on a fight-by-fight basis. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Shout out to Terence Crawford on a great show. Shout out to Kell Brook on a great show. And Kell Brook, if that's your last fight, champ, I think that fight, even though you got stopped in 4 rounds, I think it's a perfect way to go out because you challenge the best fighter in the world. You challenge the best welterweight in the world, and there's no shame in losing to the guys that you lost to. He's only ever lost to Golovkin, Spence, and Crawford. He didn't lose to nobody else, and he beat Sean Porter easier than anybody else ever has. And he stopped Senchenko, who had just beat Ricky Hatton. He stopped Michael Williams Jr., who was British champion, in the same round that Miguel Cotto stopped him in. Miguel Cotto was in his prime when he fought Michael Williams Jr. Michael Williams Jr. got stopped in the 4th round. Kell Brook stopped Michael Williams Jr. in the 4th round. So, he's got some good wins on his resume. People just don't want to give him the credit they deserve because people don't know shit about boxing. But Kell Brook, if it's at the end of your career, champ, I hope to meet you someday, interview you. A tip of the cap goes to you. Thank you for so many nights, great nights, and great moments as a boxing fan. I truly do appreciate you. Same thing with Terence Crawford. I got so much respect for Terence Crawford. I've met him before. He's a great guy, great person. And just thank you for another great night of boxing, man. That's my post-fight review. You guys be all right. And, take care.